Let's go. Let's rock.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Hit Confirm, episode 29. And yes, it's your boy Casey, aka Mad Jacket. Um, of course, joined by my one and only co-host, the brother from another mother, Coach. How's it going?
Hey man, appreciate you. Things are going pretty good. Fighting games right now, kind of, I'll say more part time than usual. Though I've been playing little more of the old school stuff, mainly Five Special, and just kind of learning some new games here and there. But life doing all right. How about you?
Well, I think the last time we talked, I was talking about like other games. I ended that. I asked like what games you were playing. So it's probably pretty funny that you bring that up because I finally ended the game that I wanted to end for years, or storyline at least for me. It's Kingdom Hearts 3. And in a nutshell, I would just say I'm I'm satisfied. I'll just say that it's just straight, clean, vanilla. I'm satisfied. That's it. I'll just leave it at that. Not extremely bad, not extremely good. Just okay. I'm satisfied.
No, you got your tummy full and you ain't got the itis, so you just gonna call it a dub.
Yeah, yep. And other than that, yeah, I just been still dabbling around with some fighting game stuff. But other than I've realized that I'm kind of like doing dwindling out on that. Not because of like non-competing, but like for other reasons, which I'll probably mention at the end of the show. Um, and yeah, so it's other than that, yeah, just been some Apex here and there in terms of gaming, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I've been hitting some indie titles like I've been really into weird sports titles and stuff like that. Like they have like little weird twists, but just enjoying myself. So, how
Yeah.
about you? How about you roll us into today's topic, man?
So I was actually surprised because this is the first time I didn't, I guess, come with the topic, and this one is a very powerful one, which we're talking about power in fighting games, and this can go multiple ways. But we're just gonna try to hit our strong points and or our points and what we feel is important, and that's pretty much it. I know right now power, like I said, it's a very broad word, and but we'll break it down for you for us and what we think and what we feel in terms of like talking points and everything like that. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this one. I've been kind of waiting to talk about this for a long time, but I didn't know how to like actually squeeze it in. So it's pretty cool that you brought it up.
Yeah. I kind of hesitated at first because, like you mentioned, it's a pretty broad, vague topic that you could touch on many ways. But I feel like that in itself is kind of good because there's different angles that we can approach it at in different aspects. We can approach it like, you as a player trying to improve or, the overall perception of these games and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to this discussion for sure.
Alrighty. So I'll start off the clean, or I don't want to say clean, the the Twitter rant way. Because I was gonna make a rant about this on Twitter, but then I actually saw your DM to me, and I was like, you know what? I'll save this for the podcast.
Let it out, man.
So this. I'll start off with the the Twitter rant type. So first, I'm gonna take some shots at like with characters. Characters. I'll start off like that. Start off with characters. Um, there's a certain character archetype that's been bothering me for actually recently. It's hit me how stupid this kind of character archetype has been bothering me, and I would say it's the some people might call it the Slayer archetype. Um, I don't know if what would be equivalent to Slayer in Street Fighter, so it'll be a little bit easier to understand. That the BS character with big damage.
I mean, I don't know if I like put a name like the generic thing would be like call them a bruiser, right? But you
Exactly.
but you generally just pick out the kind of examples where you have a character that can like dart in, get what they want, like a Makoto, a Slayer. And yeah,
Okay.
that concept is there. I know what you're talking about, and I think most people do when they listen.
Okay, so yeah, so like, yeah, it's funny that you brought up Makoto because she could be that like that. But so I'll start off like this. And this is going to be very controversial. um, a lot of people when they hear like characters that do set play, like the Milias, it's like I don't get to play. I don't get the when they say that, then the next thing comes in, which is the narrative of I don't get to interact. And I can see how people can make that argument of not interacting with the character because they play something on top of you and you got to block it. But at the end of the day, you're still interacting with the character's move, right?
All right.
Here's here's is this is the part. I actually don't have a problem with characters like the whole knock you down Oki type characters with projectiles and stuff. Now I have a problem with characters that have that just decide to not be on the screen and come back. And what I mean by that is in some form or fashion invol frames are being used or just frames are not there and then bam they're there. And what I mean by that is like a good example, I'll start off with Slayer and I'll go down the list. It's only pretty much 3 characters, so make it short. Slayer is a good example of this. And I've actually never really had a problem with Slayer until uh like I said recently because you just get better at these things and acknowledge stuff. And it's Marty. I'll have to give a shout out to Marty because I remember when I first picked up Guilty Gear, he hated Slayer with a passion. And I couldn't never really understand it at the time, but now I do. But anyway, having the character when people mention like interacting, there's in some form or fashion you can like there's something on the screen and you can make adjustments to it, right?
All right.
Whether you're blocking it or you can like I said make adjustments and then and use the game's mechanics or whatnot, whether it's like a FD or a KOF blowback or anything like that. So my problem is characters like Slayer that like to either A, do the whole in and out thing where now their hitbox is there or not, or even worse, more specifically like a teleport, right? Now they're actually not there. You're actually not interacting with the character like that. And at that point, and I'll get bring this all the way back to like power later. But at that point, that's when like you realize, of course, there's a counterplay to it, but it's very specific, and it's they're like I said, they don't appear in like their invol frames completely, not on the screen, and I just think that's like I guess for most FGZ players will use the word is cheap. I think it's like really, really like, broken, especially at high levels, because you can, at high level, every character is exposed, right? Every character, you know what the character does and how to beat them, right? But at the highest level, you can take advantage of those invol frames for the most part in a lot of situations than you can with like, a character where it just knocked down Oki. Um, and like I said, this is good. It's very biased for a lot of people. It may seem very controversial, but yeah, I think characters like Slayer, Hit is a good example in DBFZ. A lot of people might say, "Oh, he doesn't have the high-low mix-up. He needs help. To net that like I guess that damage, whatever." But no, he has damage, and he also can do like the Slayer in and out where he doesn't have to interact with you, and then now he's like at an advantage point, and also he has the teleport where he actually doesn't have to like interact with you, and he can get in like from full screen anywhere. And now I'm going to also mention Nagayuki in this aspect, and this is a character I messed around with even in the beta, and I always knew He was like pretty strong. um, if Eno didn't get announced, I would have probably picked him up for his auto. But now people are like, finally like realizing the power of Nagayuki because he also takes advantage of the point of, yeah, I can go in and out and use disjointed hitboxes, which is even more messed up than, or just as messed up as like, going in, teleported in and out using disjointed hitboxes with the sword. And like I said, maneuvering in and out with what's the name of the move? Fuku?
Yeah, I just call it command dash and move on.
Command dash. Yeah, good. Yeah, so like and I did play the character. I'm sorry if I don't remember the name, but yeah, the command dash he has is like and none of these moves are like complete BS, I want to say, but it's like a fine line. People have to recognize like interacting and not interacting. That's all I want to say, in my opinion, with like comparison with like the Oki with like Emilia versus um Slayer and Nagayuki and Hit, because there's literally a point where you're not interacting with the character; they're completely off the screen, or they're completely far away from you, and then they can come right back in at any time. And I think it's just a powerful trait that it's being more fleshed out now because devs have been kind of like slowly in fighting games nerfing Oki in general. It's still there. It's not like completely gone, but like the reward isn't as rinse and repeat as it used to be. So now, like the new kids on the block or the new big guy in town or whatever is like the whole. Do I have big buttons where I can go in and out and teleport and stuff like that? And it's just really strong. Um, Even UI Goku was this, and when he first came out, he's still sort of like that, but they had to tone that down because you're not interacting with him when you knock him down. He does like the wake up, you know, teleport option post patch. I mean pre patch. You weren't really interacting with him. It's because he's literally leaving the screen and coming back. So it's 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 a hard concept for I know a lot of people might not understand, but if you play fighting games for a long enough time, you'll start to understand like what's the power in that. What do you think?
So I listened to that, and yeah, a lot of my first knee-jerk instincts were like, well, there's this way, this way, this way to think about it, but I'm gonna take a step back and recall kind of a conversation we had before, and it's the same kind of thing you're talking about as well, where people will point out, this type of character does not encourage you to, interact with your opponent. And we talked about this. UI Goku is kind of example you used, but for a different reason. But we talked about characters like UI Goku, Baiken, characters who could go into I guess a stance or a way to counter moves where, you know, the vast majority of what you're gonna do is just gonna lose there, right? Even though
Right.
usually in that situation you can get the move, you can get the, frame advantage or the situation you want, but they get to just kind of slide out of it in ways that other characters don't. And I think the broader concept of what you're saying into that concept, when we were talking about that, is where you have characters where they kind of skew your choices towards a certain thing. Whether and that thing they do doesn't necessarily have to be powerful, but it does force you to move your options away from the things you would normally do. And I think that is the broader, I'm not trying to speak for you, obviously, but that's the broader concept I'm pulling from what you're saying. And yeah, that's kind of what Oki, the left right Oki kind of falls into that to a degree. But how can I put this? Like, those are more like can situations where you know what's gonna happen, right? It's a left, right, up, down, and you know how to guess those situations. They're not they're not vague, flexible situations where you gotta adapt and figure out what's going on, like like a Slayer dash or like a biking stance or guard cancel, where the situation's more undetermined. And so
Right.
and so that's the kind of thing I think that's what people look at when they see kind of powerful. Like where people put powers like I am forced to do these things. Like when you play a character like Slayer, and then like for me, you also have Raven in the excerpt too, where he has the same kind of concept with his dash, where like if you play a character with like long swinging buttons, Raven can dash through the active frames and then be in your face.
Yep.
So you end up going, well, I can't just swing there knowing they're gonna take up this space because even though that's what my character does, it ends up being, well, let me do this active move that I usually wouldn't just do just because they might just dash in my face because the I guess the ultimate quote unquote drawback is most of those tools you can't just do because you see a move. Like you're not gonna see, oh, soul press far S, so I'm gonna dash the Slayer and get in there and kill him, right? It's something you do preemptively. It's all everything start swaying away. Like in the case of like parries, for example, you start having to stagger and throw more. And for stuff like Slayer, you end up having to use your waiting option more because you gotta, let them anticipate coming in and then you punish them on the way in or at least put them in a bad situation. And the game starts turning away from, using your pokes, moving the way you want to kind of just waiting for them. And when you start putting people in a situation where all their choices start heavily going towards, X, Y, and Z options instead of just the more even spread they're used to, that's when people kind of start getting those feelings. So that's why you get it with, again, like your Vikings, your Slayers, and any other characters that kind of operate out that archetype. Like if a character has a bunch of like armor, that's another kind of example. It kind of parallels a little bit with the Slayer example you gave. Like trying to think of an example. You could kind of say Potemkin, but other games where characters have like a bunch of armored normals.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Broly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Broly kind of works, right? Broly did get complained about from what I saw on my Twitter, like when he was at his peak, for a lot of those reasons, right? Because you want to operate your game plan, he's like, nah, I'm coming in anyway. And so again, since his moves once his armor stops a lot of moves, you start having to skew your decisions. So that's the power they kind of have inherently. Whether they end up being strong characters is kind of a separate issue. But whether they're weak or strong, you start having to go, here's my regular tool set, and these are the 10 tools I use. I gotta like limit it to these three, and I gotta be smart with those three. Now you still might, be at the advantage. You still might win, but that's something people those generally don't like. It's a concept I've always kind of found.
Right.
Because what they usually say is, well, they're not playing, name of the game. They're
Yeah.
they're not playing Street Fighter. They're not playing Guilty Gear. They're not playing DBS. Whatever the game is. That's usually what happens. Like Aoi from Virtua Fighter, she has a stance. She flips her hands up, and like 90% of the moves will get countered. And so people's
Right.
like, well, she's not playing Virtua Fighter. That's the kind of thing
It's
that happens because she's like, these are the choices I usually have, but I don't get to do them.
it's so funny that you say that because and to bring it back to Nagayuki, like he's the perfect example of like I saw a tweet recently where somebody was like Nagayuki is everybody's not everybody's playing Strive and Nagayuki's isn't. I think I replied, but I remember just thinking to myself, no, I think it's the total opposite. I think Nagayuki is Strive and everybody's trying to be like that. And what I mean by that is like and I'm happy that you said like characters like that are not always necessarily like the most powerful and stuff like that, right? It takes like time and like development for like characters and the game to become what it is. And when Nagayuki is a perfect example of that. You have a game where it's like less like it went from it's less air based, right? Um and more and now it's more ground based, and now more counter hits matter, right? And now more and damage matters, and like just in pokes and everything. So what does Nagayuki excel at? All of that: pokes, damage, even movement. Now you can't even and even though you don't need to move a lot in that game, he excels at movement on the ground. And when you take that a claustrophobic, I guess, style of a game like of like the stages in the game of Strive, where you're like constantly in your opponent face compared to like other gears, and you have a character like Nagayuki that excels at that. It's like I think he's doing it the best, you know, and I think like that's the problem. Well, I don't want to say problem, but I think that's where like people are starting to realize like this character plays Strive like the best. This is how Strive should be. Like in the beta when I messed around with Nagayuki, I was saying okay, they gave me an idea about what Strive is and what it could be, and like now it's like he's fully fleshed out in that, and the other characters and people in general are trying to like catch up. It's like a race.
I'm glad you used that word problem because I'm gonna come back around to that. Yeah, you ain't done, but yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a side road to what I was talking about as far as like characters limiting your choices in certain ways. Because I feel like we jump into the next part where we're talking about this is what the games themselves reward, and this definitely is an important aspect of power in fighting games where you look at what does these games reward? Do they reward movement, upfront burst damage, complicated screen control? It can be anything or a mix of
Yep.
things. And so, like, in some games, having a lot of health is your main benefit. If the game has a lot of burst damage and your ability to do the burst damage, and what are the barriers to doing your burst damage, right? Can you just throw out your fire S and get a normal hit and get a big chunk? Can you get it meterlessly and from various positions? So the easier it is to get your damage up front, even if it's not the highest, that kind of stuff factors in those types of games. So when you look at what Strive rewards, that's why Soul was immediately out of the gate.
Yep.
Lauded as the best
Exactly.
character because he does the burst damage. He's generally safe on a lot of things, and he himself, I think he has more than average health in this game because usually he's the baseline character, but I think in this game in Strive he has more. But all the little things start working out in his favor. So like even if a character has like a lot of damage, if they gotta go, well, let me set this up first, let me do this first, and then we'll get to the damage. That kind of thing starts looking, I won't say bad, because those characters could actually be the strongest in the game, right? But when
It
you
just
start,
takes time.
yeah, it'll take time, and you just have to put it on a scale. Ease in effectiveness versus effectiveness as you put through time. And sometimes that ease and effectiveness will always just kind of stand through the test of time. They won't be bad,
Oh my
but they won't
God.
be they
Yes.
won't they won't be the best, right? And that's why a character like Johnny works because he's just making you block. Like
Yeah.
he's not doing anything really complicated. He's just doing what the game rewards, which is keeping you in block stun and punishing you for trying to leave it. So
I'm ha-
like,
I'm so happy you mentioned Johnny because you picked him up, so you have a better understanding of that now.
yeah, yeah, he's just like he gets what he wants in the corner, he gets what he wants mid screen. So that's what those kind of games. And then you have a character that are generally considered not so good. You take a look at Anji, right? He has to,
Right.
we'll say free patch because I can't honestly say I know much about him in the current patch. But beforehand, he's not getting much damage off of his long pokes. He's not really getting much from a lot of his special moves just in general. So he has to kind of convince you to do X, Y, and Z first, and then he can get it. He can get his decent rewards, right? He's not
Right.
lacking in rewards, but how does he get to them? How many hoops does he have to jump through compared to Soul to get what he wants? And that's generally where you see the disparity in that kind of character. So the game's like, look, you just need to hit him. You need to put him on the wall, break him, and then you're good. And that doesn't mean that's the only thing that's good, but when you have that, you don't have to question yourself. You
Right.
can get what you want right away, and you always have a baseline effect. And even if it turns out, people dig through and say, "Oh, actually, Anji's really good once you learn and master these things, right?" But he won't ever. But he's more, what can I say, susceptible to how the game patches and stuff like that will happen, because the game doesn't inherently favor him. So if he gets like the right numbers, the right situation, he can go up, he can go down. He's more characters like him, Faust, and stuff like that are probably going to be more prone to being volatile as far
Yeah.
as the strength goes in the game. Like they made the FD changes, right? Stuff like that benefits characters like Faust, Axel, probably Anji, and it takes a little bit of bite out of like Nagayuki and Soul and stuff like that. But those characters are still gonna have like the solid stuff that the game inherently rewards out of the gate. even
Yep,
when
because they're the
things like
front,
yeah. So
front, the forefront. Yep.
so that's the kind of thing you always got to kind of look at. Like, what is the game itself telling you is good? You know, like if the game has like fast meter build, and then your character has or your character has fast meter build in a game where meter gives you a lot of damage or a lot of really good situations, then you start looking at that kind of thing. So when Soul does a combo, he gets 40 meter back, and when Faust does a combo, he gets 15 meters back. Stuff like that. They're all little things, but you got to look at what does the game care about, and that's generally where you'll see where a lot of your power lies. And generally, characters that are strong regardless have some kind of situation they can set up where that kind of stuff just doesn't work as well. Like if Faust gets his items going, you're not gonna hit him because he's gonna
Right.
snowball you. All the stuff that the game rewards is not in play as much at that point when you're op, operating at a kind of a quote unquote optimal state.
Yep. And it's interesting because I'm happy that because now I can kind of like transition in terms of like that it seems like the devs kind of are they are aware of character power levels, right? Because you have social media and everything. But I like how what they've been doing over. I want to. When did this start? When I mention it, you'll probably have a better idea of like when they probably started doing this in other fighting games. I want to say maybe it was Exerd with the start of the buffering system. But anyway, I saw a tweet from I don't know if you meant earlier by problem when you meant problem skater, but anyway, I saw problem skater. Shout
Nah,
out to
nah.
problem skater. I love that dude. But check out his streams anyway, by the way. Very entertaining dude. He deserves more views. But yeah, problem skater made a tweet that I actually kind of disagree with, which was in it was basically a tweet about and I probably should have had this booted up already to like kind of not paraphrase it, whatever. But basically, he was saying that he disagrees with devs making character moves like that are like heavy execution and rewarding,
Hmm.
and making that like easy and making like the excess, I guess, easy. And I hope I didn't like butcher that. If you if you're listening, problem, sorry. But yeah, and I back maybe a couple years ago I would agree with him, but like perfect example is with, I guess I use DBFZ again. Or I'll start with Exert. I want to say it was Exert Sign.
Hmm.
They had a update, or I want to say it was the update from Exert Sign to Revelator, where they updated the buffering system. And a lot of people probably don't remember this because it like happened so quick. And but I remember because as an player, Eno's bread and butter was her IAD. And I remember it being kind of annoying when Exit first came out, and then when they did the buffering system, it was just as easy doing like DPFADC super or whatever. And I remember like complaining about it at first, and then like getting over it. But then I was like, man, and then I started seeing more quality of life changes, and I think that's what he was getting at, the quality of life changes for like characters that are like and even system changes, right? That's what the devs are starting to do now. um, they're starting to take not just quality of life changes for characters, but systems. And you see this. This was very eye opening, or it's very like apparent with I'll use DBFZ again, since it's like the only game I play right now a lot heavily. Um, with the last update, which is with season 4, they made it easier to super jump, right?
Hmm.
But to like you get an automatic super jump when you jump. So now you can get like the whole moon jump that Goichi has been doing for like since the games came out. And like I remember when I first saw that change, I was like, wow, like they're acknowledging like a very strong move that only very few players can use, like literally like only like 5% of the players can use, and they're making it easier for everybody else. And like I said, back then I probably wouldn't have appreciated that type of like power for like getting. But if you think about it, I think it's really cool because it gives access. It allows everybody to have like that access. Once you understand the game, it allows everybody to have that access, and it brings more freedom and more like versatility to the game and more styles. And I think it's for they did that for Strive too, right?
Yep, they
They
did.
made a lot of things a lot more easier, not just quality of life for the characters, but for the system overall. And I think that was just it brung like it pretty much brung extra life to Strive. And now the game is like way more fun, much more interesting than it was before. You know, it feels much more fleshed out in the aspect of like, just like brainstorming and everything. So I think like devs understanding the power of like not just the characters, but not just the system, but what players find with this, what to do with the system, and be like, hey, it's cool that they're doing that with that. Let's make it easier for everybody else to do. I think that's like actually sick. I think that's fantastic.
There is definitely what you would call a debate around that concept because some people will call that removing artificial barriers of difficulty, things that have no practical reason to be difficult, quote unquote. And
Mm-hmm.
others will say, well, no, those things are difficult because that's one of the things that are representative of my skill as a player. And so people who can't do that, ultimately should not match up to me, that among other things, obviously. And
Right.
so what you end up getting is kind of like this balancing act where because like another example of this is Street Fighter 4 to Street Fighter 5, where in Street Fighter 5 they added an increased buffer, so you don't have to manually link your normals by waiting for the end of recovery because you only had like 2 frames, 1 or 2 frames or something, and so that's where plinking came in, where people started plinking to get their links. But in Street Fighter they added like a 3 frame buffer, like before your normal ends, right? So you can just kind of you can't dial them in, but the timing is far less strict. So it ended up being a situation where, these links that would be hard in Street Fighter 4 and the only people who would hit them with you or people who would practice in a dedicated state would be someone who just put a little bit of time in and more or less felt around. They can get it more or less right away and be consistent with a lot of links in the game. So there's no quote unquote hard links outside of a few juggles, or I say outside of juggles. So you end up getting a situation where Joe somebody can hit you with your links consistently. So every time you get hit, even somebody who's not skilled at the overall game, like the spacing, the anti-airs and stuff, can still hurt you. And for some people, that was like, oh yeah, this is great. Other people are like, well, why can't this person who won't put in the time can beat me? So that's the kind of concept you kind of deal with there. But trying to keep the concept like to strictly power, I guess. The thing with that kind of the balancing act that comes in with that is how much power do you give to something that anybody can do, and that kind of thing kind of depends on what your ultimate vision for the game is. Shout outs to Dice Case
Yeah.
Vision, as the kids say. But it depends. It depends on what it is you want to be valuable in your game. Like, do you want something in your game where only the good people can do it and get a reward from it? Say, I don't know, something like roll canceling, even though that's not intended, right? They took it out in a
Right.
GameCube revision of all things.
I would say
Uh,
C Viper was a perfect example of that
yeah,
because initially she couldn't even cancel her burn knuckles, and then Seth Killian was like, I think she had a glitch actually. It was a glitch, and he was like, keep it. And then she came out, and then people was like, this character's weird. And people started getting used to her, and then they was like, all right, this character is pretty broken now.
yeah. It took time and dedication to do the things with Viper that you could do, but once you can do them consistently and do the harder stuff, she was rewarded for it pretty heavily. And that's the kind of concept where, like, a lot of, especially the old heads, will look at us like, yeah, those are kind of characters I like because you put in the time, you get the power. But and then you also have kind of characters on the other end, like like let's say X or Sin, right? Sin is not very difficult. His combos pretty decent across the cast. As far as the base level, it ain't like a character like Johnny, for example, where your juggles and your just routes will change based on weights and stuff. Sin
Yep.
was pretty straightforward at his sign, where he's like, I'm gonna hit you with this, I'm gonna hit you with that, and it worked generally across the cast, and it was pretty simple, and it did a lot of damage. And so that's kind of the other end of the spectrum, where it's like the character has a bunch of low hanging fruit, but that fruit is delicious and nutritious, and will not steer you wrong. And so that's the kind of balancing act Des got to say, like, we make these things easier, but we'll make this a challenge, or whatever it is their vision is. But yeah, there's definitely that concept where people kind of are split between like should simple things be effective, like as far as damage situations, or is that quote unquote artificial difficulty? And those things should be unlocked from the gate. And hard stuff should just be for people who want to challenge, but they shouldn't get that much more from anything everybody else, right? And that's kind of like the back and forth there, and it's definitely a balance, and it's definitely the concept you have to look at for your game. But overall, I like that you brought that up because that is definitely a thing. Because Ramlethal like is in Strive is the kind of perfect example that people will point to as a character who is not very difficult, right? You make somebody
Yeah.
block your blown up sword in a corner, anybody can figure out that you're still in control, and if they get hit, they pop up in like a easy to notify or easy to see way where you can just throw the next sword, it'll pop up again, you dash up and you can just kind of pick a combo and it'll evolve brick, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously there's optimization and skill stuff there, but at a base level, it doesn't take much to get started with Ramlethal. And so that's the kind of
No.
concept people, she gets that's kind of a thing that can make a character powerful too, right? Because they don't have to worry about, weight classes, odd conversions from a straight hit because it's just gonna kind of fall right into the formula.
Mhm.
So that's the
Yeah.
kind of power in itself.
Yeah. It's you may be missing out on like maybe 10 to 100 damage, but you still getting the damage.
Yeah, you're gonna get your damage, you're gonna get your wall break, and the situation's just gonna favor you, right? You can obviously make it better, but you're not gonna be in a garbage can like some characters. Like with Zato, if you don't know what you're doing,
Oh
you're
yeah.
not gonna get that 60%, right? But when you do know what you're doing, you're gonna hurt them. You're gonna get 60% wall to wall, get your wall break, and it's gonna be good. Like every bit as good as Ramlethal, right?
Yep.
But
But we approve of Zato because he's very hard.
right,
But
yeah,
yet
yeah,
we're
it's
seeing 100% combos being found by Latif on Twitter.
right. And that's this is for not for a podcast as another day. The difficulty it's what you're willing to put up with. But I don't want to get too into that topic because while it's related
No,
to
no.
power,
I
it's
mean,
kind of another thing.
it's kind of a part of it because like you mentioned Johnny, and I when I was playing Johnny at the time, I always thought he was like really 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 easy, and everybody was like, no, he's hard. And the only reason why I thought he was easy is because going from like plus R to Exert, and I was like, the number one thing that they made easy system wise was YRC. What do you do when you make a game slow down and you make a move easy to get like your knockdown and stuff like that from like so now he can do like the unblockables and setup easier. So it's kind of like I thought it's funny enough I thought Zada would end up like how Exert Johnny was to plus R to from like Zada was to other gear games, but no, Zada stayed intact. But yeah, I say that because a lot of people like to use, and I've done this in the past, use simplicity to kind of like be the most powerful thing. And I think that's like where we're kind of like getting at the end of the day, right? Is simplicity the most powerful all the time, or is it not? Like it's that's not always the case, right?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that, but yeah, I don't think it's the most powerful thing. I think it's the most consistent and stable thing. Um, when simplicity is met with effectiveness, that's all. Like if his characters is simply simple, and their reward kind of reflects that, and then that's it stops being the power that it is, right?
Yeah, because you have what you do. You can have a very simple character that's very powerful, right? And you can have a very strong player that takes that simple character and just brings them to the top, like and just skyrocket them and never lose a tournament. And you can have a case where it's a character that's like very considered very weak because their execution, and you can have the player to take that character to the next level. We mentioned like with C Viper, and Auto actually used to be the same way in the past too. So like it all depends on like not just the characters, but like the players too. You know?
Yeah, that's true. It is like one of those things where you look at like what does it free you up to do, right? Because when your character's complicated but has high reward, then you're incentivized to press that on. And when your character's simple but has high reward, then you start focusing heavily on your strategies and stuff like that. Because you ain't got to worry about a bunch of nuance. Well, I won't say you don't have to worry about nuance because it's still a fighting game, but you don't have to, decode your character during the match. You know exactly what's gonna work. You know exactly where you want to stand. You know exactly what you're gonna get, and so it's
Yep.
just, and so you're free to like really look at what the other player is doing, and that concept's always there, but it's just kind of like I said on a scale.
And that's honestly that's the reason why I think a lot of players in America should uh if you have like a hard time figuring out what characters to play in like, whatever fighting game or whatever, and you've played fighting games in the past, you just kind of run into a stump. That's why I always feel like most players in America will do well with characters like a Hit, a Slayer, a Nagayuki, because a lot of American players are really good at pressing buttons and getting the big damage with the combo. So they understand. What I'm saying is a lot of American players probably don't understand their power, you know, um, and that's characters like that kind of cater to that,
I think that's
to
more
that
of
style.
a intermediate thing because that's what people practice when they're
Yeah,
intermediate, right? They
yeah.
don't
But
practice.
there's a lot of intermediate players in like America, right? Like, yeah, of course we have your Justin Wallens and your Punks, but there are a lot.
That's
America is big.
Yeah, that's I mean that's the point I'm saying. Like you can find those players anywhere, but they, like we live here, so that's what we're gonna see. But yeah, I
Yeah,
get what you're getting at, where the things you optimize and practice are inherently rewarded right away because people don't generally practice strategies, punishments, and stuff like that. The average person really doesn't at that level, and so that's why you see that kind of thing where like this Milia, they can't anti-air me, but when they hit me, they got the the character specific combo and the Oki right on deck because that's what they practice, right?
exactly.
And but yeah, it's just that's the kind of thing where it's just people don't practice all the nuance stuff, and you run into that wall eventually, or unless
Yeah.
your character is strong enough to beat that wall, which I guess that's what you're trying to imply with
And
like Nagara, Yuki, and
I
Slayer.
don't say it as a bad thing because it's honestly like I'm very good at like recognizing power with like players too to characters. Um, like I knew early on that Ava was like godlike with Kai, and a lot of people like will be really actually good with like characters like Hit, Slayer, and Nagayuki in America. And I wish I had like statistics on like the ratio of like how many players actually play these characters, which I don't. But I say that because like we have proof in the past of like that type of play style being really good for us. Like, and I don't want to go too deep on this, but like, Omito has mentioned in an interview that like, American players like the big damage in the combos. And it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, if you know where the power lies, that's and he recognizes that. And that's why we were like always so good in Marvel, right? Because we are so good at like, the huge getting the consistent damage and the combos. So, but yeah, like knowing where that power lies is like, I guess it can be hard for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, I guess like I'm always gonna be on the side of like you can be good at whatever you like, and you don't necessarily because I know a lot of people, and again, this is another thing that's kind of a topic for another day is that people I talk to are like, this is my style, this is what I do. I'm like, you can do other things,
Yeah.
but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just a suggestion. Like, a lot of players, because I've seen so many players when they play characters like a pixie character or like, the Chip and Millions, right? Like currently in Stride, you see on the discourse on Twitter, it's like, is this character strong? Is this character weak? No, this character is really strong. Let me show you why. And it's like, people wouldn't even think about that if they just picked up like if more people picked up Nagayuki and just swing.
I
They
mean,
wouldn't
yeah,
even like care.
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
what they're trying to do with Milia and Chip is what Nagayuki does. And that's all I'm saying. It's like, uh, move around the character select screen more and like settle on the characters, these type of characters. You might just like, find your gem. That's all I'm saying.
No, I totally get what you say because I've definitely seen cases where people, where they'll play a character like Millie, and then they'll spend the match running away instead of rushing you down. Like just pick a Kai or a Venom, And,
Yeah.
it's like if that's what you want to do, like what do you want to do? And a lot of people do just want to get in there and hit you, and
Yeah.
they cash out, but then they'll play characters that operate off of nuance. And so
Yeah,
yeah, so I think that's what
exactly.
you're trying to get at.
And it's okay, like you mentioned earlier, to have that style, right? But when you cater so differently from that, like what the character and even what the devs are trying to tell you how to play the character at this point, when you're like so different from that, style, then it kind of, and you're wondering why you lost, and like, you're kind of beating yourself up for it. Maybe that's the reason why, is because you're like not playing to the character's strengths, you're playing to your strengths.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I've definitely seen that concept a lot. But speaking of visiting the character select screen, you actually that's something I actually want to bring up because whenever I see this whole thing where people are like, I'm new and I just started playing this game. I come from Tekken or, I come from Virtua Fighter or Street Fighter, whatever game. And I see this game and I'm interested. What should I play? And most people will make the immediate suggestion of, well, here's this character is good because they're easy and effective, right? The kind of thing, what the devs are kind of pushing, right? Where
Right.
they make the character like the Ramlethal, so people will, pick her and get into the game and be able to do stuff right away. And so that's what people kind of point people to. So like this is more, I guess, towards intermediate people. My suggestion would always be is try to play as like we've kind of hinted at this and before, but try to play as many characters as possible because a lot of people, and I've definitely seen this argument a lot, and you let me know what you think about it when I'm done. Um, a lot of people will always suggest against playing like quote unquote top tier characters
Hmm.
because they'll teach you quote unquote bad habits because you don't have to work as hard with this character and da 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 da. Like and they'll be like, yeah, play this. Sometimes they'll be like, play this basic character. Play the Ryu or play this hard character, or not. I won't say hard character, but this character, who's quote unquote weaker, but they got to rely on more tools and all that. But my stance is that you can learn from any type of character you play. Like
Yep.
my actual suggestions to people when they ask these types of questions are one, do play a weaker character. Learn how to overcome your strengths. Learn how to play with minimal or sometimes having a spread of really weak options and trying to juggle that. But also, you should learn to play those top tier characters. You should learn how to dominate somebody. Learn how to take advantage of your tools and steamroll because all those lessons can fit on any character. Because like once even your weaker character will have their win conditions, and when you get into that vibe of doing what you got to do and dominating and overpowering people, and you can also see what it's like from the other side as well and see what because sometimes those characters will still have gaps and holes and weaknesses that you can't
Yep.
see when you're just like huddled down in the corner, so you'll start to understand it and you'll start to see where it's hard and where you have to think and where it all breaks apart. And another thing, this is kind of unrelated, but like play a character that you absolutely hate. That's something I started doing, and that it can be like aesthetic wise or even mechanic wise. Like if you don't ever want to play the slow grappler like Xavier because you're a speedy, start playing like play that type of character. Like
Yep.
really get into the shoes. But back on that top tier thing, do you really think that you can learn like real lessons to help you grow playing those types of characters?
Yes, because you kind of alluded to it earlier. When you play a top tier character, the first thing that you're gonna do that comes to your mind is the thing that everybody else does that you see. And then once you start playing that character more, this is what happens, and everybody falls for this. Um, they start playing against somebody who knows how to fight against the character, and then they try to use that top tier move or strategy, and it doesn't work no more. And that's when people fall out, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to." That's when they're like, "Oh, I don't think this character is as good as what people are saying." Like the
Yeah.
character might still be good, but like that's when they start doubting themselves or the character, and that's when the whole learning curve or the plateau even hits. And I think it's very yeah, you do it quicker, you get to that plateau quicker when you play like a very very powerful character. Yeah, when you play against people who may not know the matchup, you'll steamroll them. But the second you fight somebody who understands how to fight that character, even like in the slightest way, that's when you're like, oh crap, I'm slumped.
Cause you gotta actually learn how that character is powerful, right? Not just the
Yep.
straightforward stuff, but you gotta learn like this is why they're actually good, not the shallow reasons that they're good. And that I feel like
Yeah.
that's the difference people never really get. And then because they like it's obvious when a character's doing something that's really good and it works against everybody from low to high level, right? But when you start playing somebody like you said who knows the matchups, who knows how to hedge their bets against what you're doing, and then you have to like learn how to spread your own choices. They're still really strong and the character's still really good, but you have to actually learn, that L word And that's where a lot of people start saying that stuff like, this character's not, like you said, this character's not really that good. I don't even know why people say that. You know, people say this character's good, but they never labbed them because they ran into somebody.
Or
You know.
the second, do not let that character lose one time in tournament and on stream. That person popping off on the Twitch or Twitter. Bro, I told you this character is not as good. This character loses to this specific button, this specific situation. It's like, yeah, exactly. You're learning.
Mhm.
That's what happens. So, but you over like now that you learn that, what do you do? Where you go from there? Like, that's where it depends. Like, do you want to continue playing that character? Do you want to understand like how to beat that situation? And that's where it all begins.
Yeah.
You know.
That's usually where you go, oh, that's why people put this character at the top of the list. I see. That's you gotta go through several enlightenments in the fighting game journey. But yeah,
Yep.
that's one thing I want to point out. I think another thing I had on my mind was ha- is characters that have a lot of. Well, there's two things I kind of want to touch. We'll touch this one because it's quicker. Um, do you think people actually want powerful characters in their fighting games?
Here's
This
a
this is I know this is a loaded question and it's kind of
no, it's
hard, but
not for me because I played Marvel. I played Plus R, and if boys is listening to this right now, he knows why I always say this, what I'm about to say. Um, I think a lot of people they'll voice they want a powerful character or a powerful thing. They really don't actually. Saying something is entirely different than experiencing it. And this is just true with life and everything. But like you see it happen time and time again in fighting games. A good example is when Plus R got its rollback update. Me as a Plus R player, I was super. All the Plus R players were super happy. All the OG Guilty Gear players were super happy, and people who were playing Exert were like, okay, cool, I'll get to try out Plus R and everything. And then you had the group that was like, yes, I finally get to get the cheap stuff that wasn't like, the real cheap stuff that wasn't in
yeah,
Exert.
yeah,
And I just want to feel that. And it's like they get it, and it's like, nope. They experience Zappa, and it's like, nope, that's cursed. Literally, like, I don't want to deal with that. Go back to Exert or whatever game you play. So
Wah,
it's like,
Testament, wah.
exactly. And then I'm also seeing it. Oh my God, I'm seeing it with DBFZ, and it's pretty funny because so many people was like, I want mix. I need mix. I'm mix, mix, mix. I missed the season where I can snap back and it just mix people all day. And now people are like, all right, this season is cheap because everybody has like a lot of cheap stuff about them, and there's so much stuff you got to worry about. I'm like, you guys wanted this. You guys wanted all these characters to be good. You didn't want like one or two characters to be the best, and you want like more time ways to open up your opponent. It's like, there you go. The devs were listening to you on Twitter for years, and it was like, hey, here, we're going to deliver this to you. You want every character to be powerful? Here. And now you hear some people, not all, but some people like, yeah, this is not my favorite version of DBFZ, which blows my mind because I'm like, this is basically the dev saying, have fun. Like, yeah, cool, you go to tournaments, but have fun. And at the end of the day, like, I think that's what people are forgetting. Like and that's why I like Plus R so much. Like, yeah, there's tournaments and stuff like that, but it's and that's why people still love Marvel because it's like at the end of the day, it's BS, but at the end of the day, it's having fun.
Right. So my thoughts on that are like, cause like you that Marvel example was like, you kind of know it's BS, but a lot of the BS is like on the upper end, right?
Hmm.
And so when you have those games where people are like, why are devs nerfed? Because the big one was Grand Blue in season one, right? When they nerfed the entire cast right before they put, or was it season two? When they put before they put Belial in, remember they nerfed the entire cast. They took away and dulled a lot of the characters' most powerful tools, and a lot of people were like, this sucks. Why would you make characters less powerful? Da 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 da. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Sure, sure. And then when you see more and more games, you see people will look at Soul and be like, why do they let Soul have this? Why did they let, Ramlethal have this? Why do they let May have this? And when they get buffed, well, why would you buff this character? But at the same time, at the same time, they'll if they were to like nerf Soul, why would they nerf Soul? Why would you remove the fun? It feels like kind of like a double-sided thing where you can't really make people happy. And
Oh
my
no,
my
no.
ultimate opinion, because I saw a tweet that was like this, and it's like this is exactly what it is, and it put it into words, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's like people love powerful characters, but they don't like fighting them, and that rung in my head because it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because when they see a soul that's really powerful, they don't want to get hit by that. When they say, well, there's no mix in this game, but when you put mix and stuff in the game, and so and so, the Amelia puts the pin on you and you're blocking in the corner high lows until you die, until you guess right?
right.
And then, oh, why would you put this in? This is stupid. I want to interact, as you always say. And it's like, what do people actually want? Because if you weaken characters, and then when you weaken characters, you do up the interactability, right? Because their moves operate more streamlined, or the rewards are toned down, so you get more chances to play. So there is a lot more back and forth from weakening characters, and then when you strengthen characters, obviously that goes down when you start playing people of certain skills, because Soul is, a bully. He gets in your face. He gets to do what he likes, and people are like, "Oh, this sucks." But then you make him like unsafe and tone down his damage. For people, oh, why would you make a character like this? This is not fun.
It's
And
like
go ahead.
it's almost like the way I see it in a funny way. Like I was thinking of the picture of the guy in the cockpit and like I guess a Gundam cockpit saying ha ha ha. He's like laughing, and then the picture right
I'm a
under him, it's the
genius.
same. He's
Oh
like,
no.
oh no.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of how
Like,
it
oh,
is.
and another good example is like you're in a club and you're watching a comedy going on, and the guy starts going around the room getting people, and you're like laughing so hard, and then like the spotlight is on you, and he's just getting on you, and now you're all sad.
Yo, look
Like
at that
people,
tie.
yeah, yeah, people don't like the taste of their own medicine, man.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what you have to come to realize about fighting games in general, though. Like every fighting game is BS. Not like there's no like even Koihime, like a very footsie heavy game. That fighting game is BS because once you get hit counter hit, you gotta watch the show. Like that's why yeah, it's just like every fighting game is gonna have its BS. I've mentioned plus R because like it's a lot of stuff you have to deal with that's very quick, that's in front of you. But to some extent, there's other fighting games that's pretty much the same way, especially at high level. It just becomes straight BS. So you just deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. Like a lot of it is memes. People like whining about stuff as memes, but there are people who are very serious about why this character gets to do this and that. And I'm like, well, that's the game you wanted to play. For some people,
Hmm.
obviously there are people who do like the games where the characters are weaker and slower and more deliberate. That's where Ko and Himi comes in the play, right? Even though they get the big counter hit damage, they're not made to just beat you down with strings and run around the screens just swinging, right? You're more constrained in that
You always
game.
get your turn in that game because
Yeah,
normals are all negative.
you can't just take control of somebody. And then some people will look at that like, why would you want to play something like that? And then they'll be playing the games where you get to run wild on somebody, and then when they get ran wild on, suddenly this game is dumb. The devs don't make any sense. So I don't know. I think you just need to make your peace with what you want. Like I'm kind of ranting here.
Yeah.
Like I'm obviously kind
No,
of ranting
no,
here,
that's
but
you came to the same conclusion I did. You got to make peace with what like whatever game you're playing. Like That's why it's always the interesting point for like it's very interesting when a game comes out and everybody's playing it, but it's even more interesting like once people like actually stick to the game like years later because you see the people who deal with the power, the BS that's considered going around like they know is BS. They'll sit right behind you at in top 8 that they're playing. They'll sit right next to you waiting for their match and like, yeah, this crap is BS and then get called for their match on stage for top 8 because they're like, you know what? I'm dealing with the BS. You're sitting here as a spectator watching because you dropped out, which isn't a bad thing, But it's like you got to know when to like tone it down if you're if you're not all that involved anymore. Like choose your battles.
yeah, the first episode we ever made was a contract called a fighting game. So sign on the dotted line. You know that man soul's good. You
Yep.
just accept it. Play him or accept it. But yeah, that's the main thing I wanted to point out there. Because I keep looking at Twitter and I see people, and again, I'm a big believer in cycles, where
Hmm.
people are gonna complain that stuff is too weak, and then the devs are gonna give people strong characters, very strong characters, and then people are like, "Oh, this too strong. Why did you make it like this?" And then they're gonna like start nerfing, and then what we're gonna come back to? Why did they make your characters weak again? Because I'm actually what I'm thinking is gonna happen with the next wave of fighting games, because everyone's complaining that they're too easy, too simple, is that they're gonna go the other direction, and they're gonna make basic stuff really hard to do to get reward from. Like combos will be
Mm.
be tight, and reversal windows will be extremely tight. And to get actual damage from your character, you have to know the advanced routes and stuff like that. Otherwise, you get nothing. And you know what people are gonna say?
What?
But why don't they just make this simple? Why can't I just do A, B, C special? And it's gonna come back. It always does. I'm a big believer in cycles, but that's just me.
To be
I
honest with you, the devs are they kind of already experiment with that, but they're doing it in a smart way. And I don't know if a lot of people notice this. They do it with DLC. They did it with DBFZ, and they're doing it with Guilty Gear in a way where it's like they'll add in a character that's like not all that straightforward as a DLC to kind of like get because to kind of like let people like here goes the people who for the people that's been like sticking with the game and wants like a little bit more out of it in terms of like execution and stuff. Here you go. Here's some DLC, and I think that's the way. I think that's the proper way to do it. Let the game come out. Let it have like its simple characters. Then later on, if I guess with updates, you can make those simple characters a little bit more like complicated with adding new moves. But for the most part, make the DLC characters a little bit more complicated. Because that what that does is like if you invested money, that shows that you're interested in the time in the game. So you're interested in like stuff like getting better, like learning all that stuff like that. So I think they thought that through. Honestly, I think they're going that route. I don't think they're gonna release a game where characters are automatically like super complicated.
I think like in this current wave, like with KOF 15 and stuff, I don't think so. But I think like the next wave after that, they're gonna start trying to that. That's my theory and prediction anyway. So we'll see how that ends
Mm.
up going. Like when you go like 2023 and beyond, whatever they're building. Like if Street Fighter 6 ends up having like hard links and characters with weird stuff.
Well, you got to remember, we're in terms of the FGC, we're such a small niche audience, and they do listen to us. But at the end of the day, what makes the money is what is the biggest voices, and the biggest voices is the casuals, right? They're giving them the most money because like now games are much more accessible, the fighting games in general. So now you have more people playing like Gear than ever. So like yeah, Gear, like I said, Gear is a perfect example. So like um I feel, I feel like DBFZ was the blueprint of that. And like Gear is like took that and they wrote because the devs showed that they talk to each other, like not just the Gear devs talking to Gear devs. I'm saying like Gear talking to SNK devs and SNK devs. Some of them talking to like to French bread devs. Like they all like conversate with each other, so they all bounce ideas off each other. But like they're still competing. But I think like at the end of the day, they want each other to win because if they they want to make the industry in that aspect grow. And that when you do that, you make my pockets grow. I was thinking of Rita from Power Rangers.
Again,
Yeah.
it,
So
like this is still kind of another topic, but like my thoughts on Guilty Gear's popularity, or just in general, this kind of stuff is not related to system mechanics. And I think that people who actually play these games consistently are the people who ask for that kind of stuff. And that there's like
yeah,
a small group of people who are in the FGC who are actually not casual, who wouldn't ask for it. That's my thoughts. I think the
yeah,
actual casual audience that people think about don't really care what the system mechanics are. They just care the game is cool. That's just my
no,
thought.
they don't.
Because Strive was advertised pretty well compared to Xrd, for example. But
Yeah,
again,
but that's why I was saying like that's why they do the DLC the way they do, like making characters like the complicated characters, putting them in like the back burner, and then releasing them as DLC because like they're rewarding the people that stick with the game versus like the casuals that just like just mess around. They're most likely not gonna give a crap about the DLC, right?
well, I'm saying like if you make characters like Jacko and Gold Lewis in the base cast, that doesn't matter to those people at all. That was my thought, but again, that's kind of another
Yeah,
topic
yeah,
that we get into. But that we can definitely talk about that because I definitely have my
yeah,
thoughts on what attracts people to fighting games and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts on that. But as far as
yeah.
the power topic, the only thing I really had in mind is like how do you actually play against powerful characters? But we've talked about stuff like that before, so I didn't really want to get that deep into it.
I
A lot of it
think
is just kind of accepting it.
yeah, accepting it, and for the most part, I always find just me personally, I always find out what's powerful about a character before most people do. because I move around the character select screen. Like people get upset when I use things in casuals and you're like, man, play your real character. There's a reason why I'm not always playing my real character because I'm trying to show you what's powerful so that way when you go to a tournament, because I can't go to most tournaments, when you go to tournament, you're like, oh, a friend of mine showed me how messed up that is, and you're using it the same way he's using it or whatever, and I just know how to deal with it, Just put more eyes on what's powerful. But yeah, I have no problem fighting powerful things. I will say though that I can't stand characters that have disjointed hitboxes like that move in and out and they're like that just
You brought it full
teleport and
circle.
like the whole hit thing. I hate it.
You brought it
Props
full
to you, hit
circle.
players.
It's the very first topic of the podcast. You brought it back
I
beautifully.
can't stand it. I can't turn.
Hey man, put out your
Screw you, hit player.
preemptive pokes like a normal person. Oh wait, man. That's all you gotta do, man.
Dude, I no, I have to wait for him to actually do the move and then punish, and hopefully he doesn't. Because if you just a small tip, if you're blocked hit in the air, he's plus, but you have to block him in the ground. And most of the time, hit players are not doing that his teleport move without an assist. So it's like I'm getting in at any time I want, even if he's super or whatever, he's getting in. So
Yeah, man. I can definitely see you crafting that tweet.
oh god,
But
yeah.
man, I got nothing else. You got anything else on your mind, man?
I'll just say this: I'm not gonna be uh involved with too much fighting game stuff more and more as time goes on. Um, and then there eventually I'll probably just cut it out for a good minute because right now I just want to focus on like my career and like moving. So yeah, I won't be doing too much like fighting game stuff from now on in the near future too. So,
Okay.
but that's it's not a bad thing. It's just like I'll come back. I might come back someday, but I just want to focus on my other hobby in my other career.
Hey
So
man, life's a journey, man. You don't know what you'll keep up with, so I get you. How about this? I know I'm suggesting this all on stream on the actual recording and not outside of it. But let me know what you think. How about we
mhm.
make episode 30 whenever we do it? We'll make that the last episode. But if you ever come around to that, we'll start another one, and it'll be season 1 or season 2, episode 1, with a kind of a fresh overhaul to it. How you feel about
Man, that is the worst idea ever. Who put
that?
that? No, I'm messing. That's actually perfect. Perfect. Like no, that's you said it. Like I agree. I think I wouldn't mind doing that.
All right.
I'll try to do it. Try to get it. I guess before the end of the year.
Okay. Episode 30, nice round number to end it on. It's it. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But
Shout out to all you 30-year-olds out there. You're not
so
that old, but you're not that young.
you heard it here, folks. First here, folks, we'll have one more episode, and we'll kind of put a pin in it. But if the circumstances realign, we'll be back. But I think
Yep.
for the most part, we've touched a lot of topics over I guess the time span we've been doing this. Had a lot of good guests, and we've touched a lot of topics. Because I've always had, 'cause me and you always get into these random talks for no reason, and then and then I was
Yeah.
like, because I think I was playing what was I playing? I was playing Fexel Trials, and you're like, hey man, what you want to talk about something real quick? I'm like, sure. And then I'm like, you know what? Let me just turn my stream on. That's how this all started. And then you came back to me. It's like, hey man, let's do it again. And so I I always kind of wanted to do something like this. Well, it would have been just myself, but before you and I kind of got together, where I wanted to talk about a lot of stuff about fighting is that people don't talk about. Like people don't talk about, how to deal with fighting as a weak character, how to fight strong characters, the mental games. They don't talk about, how your emotions affect you. They don't talk about, how you should train, how you should, be involved with others in your community. They don't talk about that stuff. That's usually just, here's how the character where they do anti-airs, they do that kind of stuff. So that's what I wanted to kind of approach and talk about. And for the most part, there's a lot of people who seem to very much like it. So I'm definitely glad you got me involved in it. And I think I more or less got all the stuff off my chest that I wanted to. But what are your thoughts, man?
No, likewise. You said pretty much everything I said, and I wanted to say, and honestly, another reason why I wanted to do this is because I wanted to have not just a podcast for during the time, during that's why we didn't do too much news because I didn't want it to be like, oh, you go back to this podcast and it's like it's too much to remember. I just wanted to have like ideas and stuff that stick, and like knowledge and stuff that stick, so that way you can always go back and like listen to us. And that's pretty much it. And just wanted to have like a timeless podcast. I didn't actually mean for it to be that way, but then I just remember, like you said, the first episode, I just wanted to have something that stick and just conversation. And ever since I was like, I guess we should roll a podcast like this. Where we just have something that sticks instead of it just being just news, because you got to do that all the time. And news it will always be there.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a few topical things at the beginning, but for the most part, the skills and abilities and perspectives I think are pretty universal and will last the test of time.
Yep.
But yeah, I pretty much wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. But like I said, I got nothing
I
else.
appreciate you, coach. I appreciate you, man. You the
Man,
best.
I appreciate you a ton, man, because for the most part, I don't do a lot of projects. I have a lot of ideas for projects, but
Right.
honestly, this is the first time I felt like I saw something through to the end. And so I have you to thank.
Thanks, man.
I mean, like, I've learned a lot of things, but like something where I'm like, this is a thing that I want to do, and thing that I truly want to do, and I saw it through to the end. So yeah, I definitely got you to thank for that.
I really appreciate it, man. No, I really, honestly, I really appreciated the fact that, like, you gave me the time. You could have easily just gave me to run around every time. You could have been like, nah, maybe next time. You could have easily put me off. But I think like the best part about like doing this podcast with you is like you gave me at least the time, and I have more words can't even express how like much respect I have for you on that. So
Likewise,
appreciate
sir.
it.
But I got nothing else to say, so I'm just gonna say, peace out.
Peace.